As the host's voice faded, I finally understood the reason behind those subtle glances. Davis, who was supposed to be the best man, stood under the spotlight at the center of the stage, waiting for the bride to walk slowly toward him. The floral scent in the air made me dizzy, and the drumbeat in the background music seemed to echo my own pounding heartbeat, thump, thump. I watched the man who had just told me he loved me yesterday now holding the bride's hand and kissing her. Half of the guests were watching them, while the other half were glancing at me. In this beautiful, moving wedding, my expressionless face stood out like a sore thumb. I felt like a joke. During the wedding speech, Davis thanked the guests, friends, and his parents. As soon as he finished, his gaze shifted toward me. "Rebecca, I've thought about this for a long time, and I decided to say this to you during the wedding." I held my breath, noticing out of the corner of my eye that Davis's friends had subtly positioned themselves near me, as if afraid I might rush onto the stage and ruin the ceremony. "Thank you for being by my side all these years, but I'm sorry, the girl I want to marry is someone else." The bride beside Davis teared up at his words, and the two of them gazed at each other, lost in their own world. Finally, I snapped out of it and realized I should have left long ago. But when I tried to move, I found my body stiff and unresponsive from the overwhelming tension. I knew the moment I sat down among the guests, I had become the subject of everyone's gossip. But I stubbornly refused to let anyone see me falter. As I tried to compose myself, I heard the bride begin her speech. At the end, she called out my name. "Rebecca, I'm sorry we had to meet like this." It took me a few seconds to react, and when I looked up, my expression betrayed my confusion. "Davis wanted to talk to you earlier, but I stopped him. He always saw you as a sister, and I was afraid he might say the wrong thing and hurt your feelings." Claire went on and on, thanking me for things I barely registered. All I could do was suppress the ache in my chest, force a smile, and wish them a happy marriage. Half of the guests were familiar faces, and their gazes were filled with pity and sympathy. It seemed everyone knew about Claire's existence. Only I had been kept in the dark, like a fool, played for a fool. When I finally felt steady enough to walk, I grabbed my phone and got up to leave. Someone behind me called out, "Hey! You forgot your bag." I thought to myself, that bag was a gift from Davis. I don't even want to touch it again. The noise of the wedding faded as I stepped through the doors. The sunlight hit my face, and the smile I had been forcing finally crumbled. "You look terrible. Anyone would think you just attended a funeral." I was startled to find someone had seen me in this state. Turning toward the voice, I saw Evan leaning against his car, smoking. Amid my chaotic thoughts, I somehow remembered why Evan hadn't gone inside. He was allergic to pollen. "Want to leave? I can give you a ride." Without thinking, I changed direction and got into the passenger seat of his car. Evan didn't ask where I wanted to go. He stepped on the gas, and his sports car shot forward like a rocket. My anger, hatred, and all my negative emotions were soon replaced by the fear of possibly dying in a car crash. By the time Evan stopped, all those troubling thoughts had been pushed to the back of my mind. My hands trembled as I unbuckled my seatbelt. When I opened the door, my legs gave out, and I collapsed to my knees. "Did you really just attend a funeral?" Evan walked over and crouched in front of me. Without looking, I knew my face was pale, like I'd seen a ghost. "I'm not ready to die yet." "Were you trying to catch a flight or rush to your next life?" Evan reached out and brushed away a tear from the corner of my eye. Only then did I realize I had been crying out of fear. In the adult world, one look at his expression told me he was interested in me. After all, I wasn't bad-looking, and my figure was decent. Sitting on the ground in a tight dress, tears in my eyes, it was hard for any young, passionate man not to feel something. After what happened at the wedding, it felt like my pride had built a firewall. Without hesitation, I blurted out what was on my mind. "Do you need someone by your side?" At the last moment, I changed what I was going to say from girlfriend to something more vague. I was afraid he might think I was overstepping. Evan gave me a dark look but didn't say anything. Instead, he helped me up and gently brushed the dirt off my legs. The next moment, he scooped me up into his arms. Afraid of falling, I instinctively wrapped my arms around his neck. It felt so natural, as if this was how things had always been between us. I was too busy looking around to notice Evan's slight pause. Not far away, a plane was parked. Remembering my earlier accusation, I couldn't help but feel a little amused. From the time I got into the plane until it took off, about 40 minutes passed. I didn't ask where we were going. Evan handed me a bag of clothes, and with the help of a beautiful flight attendant, I took a shower on the plane. Strangely, ever since I got into Evan's car, I hadn't thought about Davis once. I even found myself admiring this so-called billionaire's toy. Before my family's downfall, our status was on par with Davis's family. I was considered wealthy myself, so I wasn't easily impressed. But Evan's family existed on a whole different level. If it weren't for Evan's grandfather, who was a mentor to our parents' generation, Davis and I would never have had the chance to meet Evan. After my shower, my mind felt clearer. Remembering how I had practically offered myself to Evan, a wave of shame washed over me. I almost forgot how to breathe. "Are you planning to camp in there?" Evan knocked on the door, and I slowly opened it, avoiding his gaze. "Are you really that heartbroken over Davis's wedding?" Noticing my unusual silence, Evan's expression grew darker. His assumption shocked me, and I shook my head vehemently, denying it. "Who's thinking about him?" "I was thinking about you." As soon as the words left my mouth, the room fell silent. I closed my eyes, regret piling on top of regret. I wished I could disappear. Suddenly, I felt the warmth of another person's lips on mine. Evan's voice was low. "I've been waiting years to hear you say that." I was too caught up in deciphering his words to notice that I had instinctively responded to his kiss. Evan paused, pulling back slightly, his gaze intense. "Is this okay?" If I hadn't been so close, I might have missed his whisper. Feeling something wet at the corner of my mouth, I licked my lips and noticed Evan's Adam's apple bob. After a moment's thought, I stood on my tiptoes and kissed him again. When I felt resistance, Evan stopped for a long time. By then, I was half dead from the torment, whimpering and begging him to let me go. "Let you go? You'll never leave my side for the rest of your life." I don't know how long the flight lasted. In the ups and downs, it felt like an eternity had passed. I have no memory of how I got off the plane. When I woke up, the first thing I saw through the window was the greenery outside and a giraffe walking among the trees. If it weren't for the arm wrapped around my waist, I would have thought it was all a dream. As I moved, I felt sore all over, as if I had just run a marathon. I gently moved Evan's arm aside and slowly got up to wash up in the bathroom. Halfway through brushing my teeth, the bathroom door suddenly opened. The moment Evan saw me, his expression relaxed, and he let out a sigh of relief. His bare chest bore faint red marks. In my distraction, I accidentally swallowed some toothpaste foam and nearly gagged. "Shy? Looks like we haven't done enough." Evan's words sent the temperature of my face skyrocketing. By the time we sat down for breakfast, I still didn't want to talk to him. "I'll take you to meet some people later," Evan said as I finished eating. I looked at him in confusion, but he remained cryptic, refusing to tell me who we were meeting. I thought it would just be a few of Evan's friends, but when I saw his parents and grandfather, I was so embarrassed I could have dug a hole in the ground. Under the table, I pinched Evan's thigh hard. To his credit, he didn't even flinch and even managed to introduce me to his family with an arm around me. "This is the person I'm going to marry." Of the 5 people present, I was the most shocked by his words. Just yesterday, Evan and I had been mere acquaintances at best. And after just one night, even if that night had been somewhat intimate, that was no reason for a wealthy heir like him to casually decide on a marriage partner. And why was I, the other party involved, only being informed now? I felt like I was still dreaming. It was only thanks to the manners I had learned growing up that I managed to converse politely with Evan's family. Evan's parents were regulars on financial newspapers and billionaire rankings. I had expected them to be difficult to get along with, but after Evan introduced me, they both smiled warmly. His grandfather, who already knew me, was even more welcoming. He looked at me with a smile, but when he turned to Evan, his expression turned stern. "It took you this long to win my granddaughter-in-law back? How useless." His grandfather's sudden remark made me blush. Evan even agreed with him. "It's my fault for listening to you and focusing on my studies, letting someone else take her first." Over the course of the meal, I learned from their conversation that Evan had mentioned me to his family long ago. Evan's grandparents were both professors. Their family was strict, with many rules. Evan's parents were busy with work, so he grew up with his grandparents and was very obedient. He had planned to confess to me after graduation, but Davis and I became a couple during our sophomore year. If it weren't for my parents' tragic accident the year I graduated, Davis and I would have been engaged by now. At the end of the meal, Evan's mother asked for my contact information. It was only then that I remembered my phone had died long ago. Back at Evan's estate, as I plugged in my phone, I wanted to talk to him about our relationship. While I was thinking of how to phrase it, my newly charged phone buzzed incessantly. Evan sat across from me, his eyes fixed on my phone, lost in thought. There were countless missed calls and messages. Without looking, I knew they were all about Davis's wedding. "Evan, why did you take me to meet your parents?" Even though Evan had already shown me through his actions, I still wanted to hear him say it. Why? Why did he take me to another country after I had been publicly humiliated and introduce me to his family? What do you think? Evan countered. He leaned back in his chair, and with the backlight, I couldn't see his expression clearly. I didn't respond. Even though I had my thoughts, my rationality kept me from saying anything presumptuous. Looks like I haven't done enough. Sorry, this is my first time in a relationship. If I'm doing something wrong, you need to tell me. I stared at him in shock, trying to process his words. He suddenly stood up, one hand resting beside me, the other taking my phone. While I was still processing, Evan answered the call. It turned out he had noticed someone was calling me. He was so close that I could see the small mole on his eyelid. At that moment, I didn't realize that I, who usually valued personal boundaries, felt no displeasure at Evan answering my phone without permission. The person on the other end seemed surprised the call had gone through and hesitated before speaking. The phone was on speaker, and I reluctantly shifted my gaze from Evan's face to see who was calling. It was Davis's mother. "Rebecca, is that you?" "You finally answered." She and my mother had been classmates and were as close as sisters. She had always been kind to me. But at yesterday's wedding, she had also been one of the onlookers. "What do you want?" My voice was cold. Before this, I had been close to her, even considering her a second mother. There was a pause on the other end, and just as I thought the call had dropped, I heard her sobbing. "Rebecca, I'm sorry for what happened to you, for putting you through this." She cried as if she were the one who had been betrayed and humiliated, not me. Out of respect for our past relationship, I didn't interrupt her. She explained that their family's company was in trouble, and they had no choice but to arrange a marriage between Davis and Claire. She begged for my forgiveness and asked me not to let anyone spread rumors. I was confused, not understanding what she meant. Evan, who had been silent until then, spoke up. "Did you really think she was an easy target because she's an orphan? You know exactly what you did." Evan was someone everyone in our social circle wanted to curry favor with. His voice was distinctive, and anyone who knew him would recognize it immediately. Whether out of guilt or something else, Davis's mother stopped crying and quickly hung up. "While you were sleeping, I had someone look into them. The rumors circulating are also my doing." Seeing my confusion, Evan explained. I deliberately ignored his pause when mentioning my sleep. I took my phone and opened Instagram, which was flooded with notifications. Yesterday's wedding hadn't been large, and half the guests were people I didn't know. Someone had posted a video of the ceremony with a sensational caption, "Best man becomes groom. Cheating scumbag brings ex-fiancée to his own wedding, publicly friend-zoning her in front of everyone." The comments were a mix of disbelief and declarations of lost faith and love. Watching the wedding footage again and hearing Davis and Claire's words, I felt surprisingly calm. Davis and I had known each other for over 20 years and had been together for 5. Everyone who knew us said we were a match made in heaven. When my parents died and our family's company was taken over, Davis and his family had been incredibly supportive. And yet, this man who had promised to love me forever had betrayed me, found a new girlfriend, and made me witness his wedding. It was a cruel twist of the knife. "I was bluffing earlier, but your family's downfall might not have been an accident." Evan's words shocked me again. "What?" Thinking back to Davis's mother's reaction, I also sensed something was off. Remembering how devastated I had been when my parents died, and how our company had started falling apart right after their funeral, my eyes welled up. That period had been so dark that I almost didn't make it through. Davis had been my lifeline. The thought made my heart ache. Had his kindness been an act? Had I been living a lie all this time? I'm sorry I wasn't there for you back then. If I had been, I would have uncovered any foul play. Evan had suddenly gone abroad during his third year of college and only returned last year. How could I blame him for that? Evan sat down beside me and pulled me onto his lap. Davis and I had been together for years, but aside from kissing, we had never been intimate. I had doubted his love because of it, but he had always said he respected me too much to push me. What had happened with Evan yesterday had been a reckless act of self-abandonment in the heat of the moment. Even though we had been more intimate, I still felt uncomfortable and squirmed slightly. Stop moving. Evan's voice was hoarse. Realizing what was happening, I froze, not daring to move. Evan gently kissed behind my ear. Don't worry, I won't touch you for the next couple of days. I had never noticed how blunt Evan could be. His words distracted me, and I focused on cooling the heat in my cheeks instead of dwelling on Davis and his family's possible misdeeds. Evan's estate was like a small zoo. Worried I might get bored, he introduced me to each animal and their backstory. I had always noticed that cats and dogs were drawn to me, but I never expected Evan's larger animals to be so curious about me too. When a majestic lion rolled onto its back and let me rub its belly, I felt a pang of envy for Evan's lifestyle. Just as my hand touched the lion's belly, Evan, who had just ended a phone call, scooped me up. That's a male. Mind the gender. The lion and I stared at each other, both confused. It took me a moment to realize Evan was jealous of a male lion. On the third day at the estate, Evan, worried I might get bored, took me on his private plane to inspect his properties. Under this pretext, he spent the next month taking me on trips. By the fifth flight, I realized that not once had he let me sit quietly from takeoff to landing. By the end, I felt my legs go weak at the sight of a plane. During this period, Davis called me more than once. I was caught by Evan when I picked up the first call. He glared at me and blocked all of Davis's contact information on my phone. When another unknown number called, he did the same thing, enjoying it like a game. On the day I returned to the country, Evan dropped me off right outside my door. I have something urgent to take care of. Pack your things, I'll come pick you up in a bit. While we were abroad, Evan said he wanted me to move in with him once we returned. He's always been willing to accommodate me, but he was particularly firm on this matter. I can't sleep without you. After spending a month together, I still couldn't get used to Evan's bluntness. I didn't argue right away, thinking about how he had lived his life up until now. The door lock, where I was staying, had Davis's fingerprint data saved. Just in case. Before entering, I deleted his fingerprint and changed the password. Come to think of it, this house was bought for me by Davis's mother after my family went bankrupt. Now, it should go back to its rightful owner. Most of the things inside the house were bought by Davis and me together. No matter where I stood, memories of Davis flooded my mind. Evan said that the investigation into Davis and his family was making progress. My parents' deaths were indeed connected to them. I exhaled deeply at the thought. When we meet again, we'll be enemies. I'll leave all my memories with Davis right here. Aside from things related to my parents, I packed a few clothes and closed the suitcase. Just as I was about to call Evan and tell him I was heading over first, I heard the sound of someone entering the wrong password at the door. Bang! 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 Rebecca! I know you're inside, let's talk. Open the door. It was Davis. Even though he was trying to suppress it, I could still hear the anger in his voice. At that moment, I was extremely grateful for my foresight. But I hadn't expected Davis to come with someone else. I didn't know what he had said to the person next to him. When I didn't respond, the door was slammed with a loud bang. I watched as the door was slowly destroyed with each strike. I opened my phone and saw a message from Evan on the screen. I called him immediately. The moment the door broke open, Evan finally answered. Evan! Hurry, come save me. Davis and an unfamiliar man walked in, holding sticks. What's going on? Don't be scared. I'll be there soon. Hide for now. Evan screamed in a panic over the phone. I looked at the malice in Davis's eyes, too terrified to speak. Rebecca. Come over here, let's talk. Davis's voice was calm. But it was in stark contrast to the look on his face. I had never seen him like this before. What's there to talk about? I didn't understand why Davis was acting like this. Afraid of provoking him, I tried my best to remain calm. Davis tossed the stick he was holding and spoke softly. "Why are you with Evan? What's your relationship with him?" I didn't expect him to bring up Evan right away. "Me and him? It's exactly what you think." His tone, like he was catching me in the act, made me uncomfortable. I responded with a bit of anger in my voice. "End things with him, pretend nothing happened. I've already put this house in your name, you can still live here." I realized I had never truly understood Davis all these years. "What do you mean by that? You want me to be your mistress?" Davis laughed. "Don't say it like that. Getting married wasn't my choice. Everything I said to you back then was because of Claire's demands. The person I love is you." "Shut up." If before, Davis made me feel that the years I spent with him were a waste, now, he just disgusted me. How dare he think that after publicly rejecting me, I'd just stay put? Who gave you the nerve? Who gave him the confidence? Break up with Evan. Whatever happened between you two, I don't care. Be obedient, stay with me." Davis tried to come closer to hug me. I pulled my arm away and slapped him. The man who had come with him raised his phone, pointing it at me and Davis. I had no idea what they planned to do. But my intuition told me it couldn't be good. "I'd been with you for so many years and never dared to touch you, but now Evan got ahead of me. Don't be scared, I'll go easier on you later," Davis said, then took off his shirt. While he wasn't looking, I tried to escape, but the man with the phone grabbed me and shoved me back into Davis's arms. Davis immediately wrapped his arms around me, burying his head in my neck. "Let go of me, Davis. If you touch me, I'll kill you." "Ah!" A man's scream suddenly echoed from the side. Davis froze, turning to see what was happening, but someone grabbed him and threw him to the ground. Several men in black beat Davis and the stranger with fists and kicks. I collapsed onto the floor, tears streaming down my face. The two men were gradually silenced. One of the black-clad men approached, and I instinctively moved back in fear. "Sorry, miss. We got here late. Mr. Evan is on his way, you don't need to be afraid." He explained briefly, and I finally understood what had happened. Evan always had bodyguards with him. After dropping me off, he'd feared something might happen to me and sent some of his men back. But he hadn't expected Davis to slip through the cracks in under half an hour. When I learned how much Evan cared for me, I wiped my tears and thanked the bodyguards. By the time Evan burst in, I was already sitting on the sofa, trying to act normal. He pulled me into his arms, almost suffocating me. "Thank God you're okay. Which hand did Davis touch you with? I'll chop it off and get revenge for you." All my lingering fear vanished with those words. I looked up and kissed Evan's Adam's apple. "Your bodyguards were so quick." "I'm fine." Evan released me and cupped my face with both hands, kissing me fiercely. I responded, wrapping my arms around him. I didn't know when exactly, but as long as Evan was with me, I was no longer afraid. Davis was thrown at his front door. The bodyguard who'd listened and said Davis's mother had fainted from shock. Claire nearly had a miscarriage. The investigation into what happened all those years ago is nearly complete. I was about to meet with someone who knew the truth when I nearly let you get hurt. Evan was still in shock. Seeing his somewhat panicked eyes, I couldn't help but comfort him. No one else had probably ever seen him like this. And strangely enough, it was kind of cute. The next morning, an article suddenly appeared on the trending list. Title: Former classmate kills for money, steals family fortune. When I woke up and opened my phone, I saw this topic, and my brows furrowed slightly. The article was very detailed. It started by pointing out the suspicious circumstances surrounding my parents' accident, analyzing everything bit by bit. It was only after reading it that I realized how many hidden secrets there were from back then. Evan's grandfather was a professor of pharmaceutical chemistry. My parents and Davis's mom were all his students. Davis's dad was a businessman, but because of his wife's expertise, he shifted to the pharmaceutical business. Unexpectedly, their wealth grew exponentially. To help their business expand, Davis's mom invited my parents to join their company. My parents had been researchers at a scientific institute before. At that time, I had already been born. My dad had always wanted a different lifestyle to give me a better future. That invitation sparked an idea in him. He gathered some money, and both he and my mom resigned from their jobs, planning to go into business for themselves. Davis's mom even had an argument with my mom over it. The pharmaceutical industry is highly profitable with a wide variety of products, and my dad, choosing to avoid competing directly with the drugs they produced, started working on other types. Seeing this, the two families agreed to cooperate, complementing each other. After Davis's mom became a wealthy housewife, she stopped being involved in the company's affairs. But my parents still kept up their own research practices. Before the accident, my dad had developed a drug. Its effects were great, but the risks were high. He didn't want to profit from it, and one day, while having dinner with Davis's parents, he casually mentioned it. Davis's dad, ambitious and eager to save the company during a financial crisis, heard about it and became interested. He tried several times to buy the formula from my dad, but my dad refused each time. So, he orchestrated an accident that cost my parents their lives. I majored in art in college, which had nothing to do with the family business. After my parents passed, the company kept encountering one disaster after another, most of it orchestrated by them. Reading this, I recalled the house I used to live in. That must have been Davis's mom's guilty conscience, compensating me. The article also mentioned Davis's sudden marriage. The drug they produced from that formula finally caused a huge scandal. In the past few years, there had been a few cases of people feeling ill after taking the drug, but they had managed to hush it up by paying people off. This time, however, the number of incidents had skyrocketed. Since the company collapsed, I stopped paying attention to the business world. Naturally, I didn't know how much dark work Davis's family had done to cover up the scandal. Claire's family had some connections, and when Davis's dad was introduced to them, Claire took a liking to Davis and proposed that he marry her. She knew that Davis and I had been together for many years. For some reason, she took a perverse pleasure in not only refusing to let Davis break up with me, but also forced him to announce the breakup at the wedding. For the sake of her family's interests, Davis chose to compromise. No wonder Davis, who had always restrained himself from expressing love towards me, was clinging to me until the day before the wedding, repeatedly telling me he loved me. It was so disgusting. Suddenly, a hand brushed across my eyes. Evan had woken up. He pulled me into his arms and whispered, "I'm glad you haven't been crying." It was strange, but after seeing the truth, I felt very calm inside. I could hardly even feel any anger. I want to go see my parents. Now that the villains had been exposed, my parents deserved to know the truth right away. The wind is strong up on the mountain. You stay in the car for a bit, I'll talk to them alone. Evan was serious. If I didn't leave, he wouldn't say a word. Reluctantly, I walked out of the cemetery alone. I was almost falling asleep when I saw Evan coming back. "I've been drinking. You drive us home." Evan opened the passenger door. He reeked of alcohol, clearly having had quite a bit. "You didn't drink with my parents, did you?" He nodded with his eyes closed. On the way back, I kept asking him what he had said to my parents during all this time. He wore a mysterious expression. "This is just a private conversation between me and your parents. Stop asking." The day Davis's parents were arrested, I ate more snacks than usual out of excitement. Unexpectedly, as I was burping from eating too much, Evan, in an unexpected move, proposed to me. "Why did you choose today?" Although I was happy, I didn't quite understand. "Because you're happy today, and I want to make you even happier." Evan often had a blank expression. But when he said this, I could sense his nervousness and his anticipation. He really understood me. I extended my hand, signaling for him to put the ring on me. After he stood up, I gave him a kiss, which still had crumbs of chips on it. He wouldn't mind. Davis, who had been uninvolved in those events, was released after giving his statement. He went around asking about where I was living and heard that Claire had slapped him a few times in public. The two almost divorced. I didn't have the time or energy to care about their issues. Because Evan, in a frenzy, had set our wedding date for the end of the month. There was only half a month left. As a former rich kid, this was the first time I felt the power of money. Rumors had circulated that his family was as rich as a country, and now I was seeing that it was no exaggeration. The wedding prep time was short. but Evan did his best to give me everything the best. I thought I had already lost the right to have you. When we were choosing wedding dresses, Evan suddenly said this. A good wedding dress needs to be customized, and this was the only thing Evan didn't feel confident about. Evan and I were basically having a flash wedding. I didn't expect that in less than 2 months, I would decide to marry the person beside me. Mom already gave me the most important jewelry, dresses, and such are just accessories. As long as you think I'm beautiful, then it's the best. His family had a set of priceless emerald jewelry passed down to the daughter-in-law. The day after Evan proposed, his mom had someone send it to me. It represented the elder's approval, and it gave me confidence in not caring about little details. Evan was easy to please, and he agreed that my words made sense. After I tried on several high-end wedding dresses, feeling exhausted, Evan, noticing my fatigue, decided to stop and let me pick the one that suited my personality the best. Evan had a pollen allergy, but he wanted to have flowers at the wedding. He planned to airlift some from overseas. I stopped him, fearing I'd become a widow right after the wedding, and had the flowers replaced with preserved ones. Once he learned the meaning behind preserved flowers, Evan ordered only the best ones. I saw the design plans for the wedding venue. Evan had the wedding planners create a garden using the preserved flowers. The wedding was to take place in the city where I was born and raised. Evan said, I was worried the place might be too far, and your parents wouldn't be able to see it. I didn't cry when I learned the truth about the past, I didn't cry when I brought Evan to meet my parents, and I didn't cry when he proposed to me. But when he said that, tears flooded my eyes. It was the first time I felt that Evan's directness had its advantages. He said exactly what he was thinking. No need to guess, no need to doubt. On our wedding day, many media outlets arrived after hearing about it. Evan's mom gave cash to every media outlet as a gift. She hoped they would take good photos of the wedding, capturing this moment of Evan and me. After my parents passed, I lost contact with many of my friends for various reasons. I had no idea how Evan had found their contact details. When I saw the familiar faces in the audience, I was both surprised and happy. I wish I could shout to the whole world that you're marrying me. Sensing my emotional reaction, Evan whispered in my ear. When the officiant said the groom could kiss the bride, I acted on impulse and quickly lifted the veil. I grabbed Evan's neck and kissed him. The laughter from the crowd snapped Evan out of his daze. He raised his hand to pull me closer, deepening the kiss. I don't know who posted the picture of us kissing on IG, but I overheard a lot of people talking about Davis. I didn't want to listen, but their voices were too loud. Did you hear? The photo Joyce took, someone sent it to Davis. His family's assets were frozen, and just last week he and Claire moved into a new house, but then he cleaned out the place. Claire was so angry that she lost the baby. Yeah. I saw that too. There were a lot of people outside their house, and when the ambulance arrived, Davis was just standing there in the wreckage, staring blankly. Baby, are you tired? After seeing off a round of guests, Evan came over to me. Ignoring the looks from others, he tried to pull me into his arms. I shot him several glares until he reluctantly let go. Seeing that he looked a little down, I quickly kissed his cheek. Evan visibly cheered up. From now on, nothing, no more annoying people or things, would make me feel upset. For the rest of my life, I just want to make this man beside me happy. The end.